Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So last thing before beer, I hear ice. That's good. So I'm Bill Hague, Executive Vice President at a research firm called Magid. I manage a group called the Media Strategy Group within our company. We do research and consulting. The guys at VSiN have been nice enough to ask me to moderate this panel. We've got some great folks up here, a good variety of content providers and creators and distributors. So I'll let them, Derek, we'll start with you and talk just a little bit about what you do, and then we'll go down and we'll start asking some questions.
You guys have seen a lot of me today, so I'll keep it brief. Derek Van Nostran, the CMO of VSiN. I previously was with Sinclair and OTT world, as well as previous roles at CNN in digital marketing and the Weather Channel in digital marketing.
It's Scott Shapiro. I head corporate development for Sinclair. Do our M&A work, our strategic investments, our venture capital investments, and all sorts of other things around our sports assets.
Rick Maynard, SlingTV, previous lives at CBS, ESPN. I manage our content acquisition and strategy team, so looking at our carriage agreements for different networks and our packaging, as well as building out free and new AVOD opportunities.
Geoff?
I'm late, my name is Geoff Reiss. I'm from Yahoo Sports, where we are all of, 6 weeks into our first foray into sports betting with our partners at MGM Roar, and excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, great. Thanks. I'm glad you're here. So if I could just start with you, Geoff, and then we'll come down the line. What excites you most about the world of sports betting and your business at Yahoo Sports?
Oh, gosh. I got to be careful here because I could send these guys home and fill the rest of the time talking about this. I think it's a couple of things. First and foremost, it is a way for us to build on our heritage as a leader in the free-to-play gaming space and be able to offer that next level of engagement and participation for the 10+ million people who are already playing our free-to-play games. I think that second, that the fundamental driver of success in this category is going to be around the efficiency of acquisition of the customer and being able to start from a point of view of having those 10 million players, being able to tap into another 100 or so million people in Yahoo Mail, another 50 million people a month who are coming through Yahoo Sports, and being able to create those contextual moments of engagement, put us in a unique position to serve a part of this market. So I don't know that Yahoo Sports is going to be the place where the guy is dropping 20 grand a weekend, but the folks who want to further their engagement, further their love and fun for sports, we're going to be a great place to do it. And there are only going to be 600,000 people a week who have Pat Mahomes on their fantasy team. That lends itself to, okay, well, let's talk about some side action around Pat Mahomes.
Yeah.
So I just think we're uniquely positioned. It's stuff we're already good at, and I think we've done a really good job of selecting partners that will help us excel in the space.
Terrific. Rick, at Sling, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, the engagement piece for us is huge. The more educated audiences get around sports betting, the stickier the customer gets, the more interested they'll be in staying in subscription models, paying for live television, providing those new content opportunities like VSiN, driving awareness of what other events are on, and creating a more engaging experience for our subscribers.
No, good. Scott, if I could ask it bifurcated, right? Because you at Sinclair, you have multiple properties. You manage a lot of the cable networks. So you just acquired, not just, but recently the Fox Sports Nets. You own the Tennis Channel. So I'll ask that angle. And then after that, let's talk about the 80-some markets that your stations cover locally.
So I will try to bifurcate, although we tend to look at things
that's okay
as together as possible. But what excites us, and I only caught the last presentation, but I'm sure it's been spoken about here and elsewhere, is people have talked about it's a state-by-state rollout. And when you think about our assets from a pure media perspective, we have a state-by-state footprint. We are sort of uniquely positioned to do things as a media partner, not only on our sports assets, but our broadcast assets in a way that can cater itself to whatever regulations on a state-by-state basis are in effect. So we think we're quite uniquely positioned that way. Again, not only for sports, but for broadcast. And from a pure engagement standpoint, we have, particularly on the RSN side of the equation, just an unbelievably engaged audience already. Frequently the most highest rated programming in whatever DMAs that they exist by a wide margin. And our research has shown that folks that are already engaged are also much more likely to have recently placed a sports bet. So when you think about that funnel of possibility as a media partner we could provide, to an operator, it's a pretty unique mousetrap. Again, since we have the ability to cater it state by state.
Well, if I can just insert a little bit of a data point. So we did a big national study last year, big national consumer study on sports betting. 83% of consumers who bet are more likely to watch the game that they bet on, right? Or are very likely to watch. I mean, that's, you want to talk about engagement, right? The three of you and Derek, I'm sure you're going to talk about it too. We have 83% of the folks who placed a wager saying, I'm likely to watch that game if I've got the opportunity. I mean, I like those odds, right? That's incredible.
I think you're underscoring why we're bullish on our sports assets as sports betting rolls out. Obviously, from an engagement perspective, we're hoping it's a good tailwind.
Derek, at VSiN?
At VSiN, we're about informing, engaging, and inspiring our audience, right? We want people who are engaged with the product we're delivering, and we want to be a lifestyle brand, right? The sports betting is a lifestyle. It keeps you more engaged with the sport you're watching. It keeps you more engaged with your favorite teams. It keeps you more engaged with the programming you're watching, right? So we see people watching 44 minutes at a time when they sit down and turn on VSiN. It's a long time to be spending. These people are super engaged. That's what I'm most excited about, is to bring that engagement to a much larger audience. Right now, we're catering to a very sports betting heavy audience. I think all of us want to expand that as legalization comes across the country and expand that to the average everyday fan and see what that does to the entire industry.
Rick, mixing things up a little bit. So you've got a great platform, right, with Sling and certainly with Dish, your owner. Do you see being involved in the actual wagering piece of things, or are you solely focused on the content, or do you
it's
see
something
them
we're
coming
looking at for sure. I mean, I think as we've heard, state by state, learning who's out there, figuring out what the right partners are. We, as closely as you can tie the viewing experience to the betting experience. I think Kenny was talking earlier about latency. That's something we need to work on. But as you go down that path, it's definitely something we're looking at.
Geoff, I mean, you kind of hinted at it in your earlier comments.
Yeah, 1,000%. And again, this is a natural extension. If you think about it, right, the best and most explosive products that have come to scale and maturity over the course of the last 15, 20 years in the digital age have been things that captured things that people wanted to do all along and couldn't. Right? Yeah, it's not like Apple invented me wanting to take my music with me. It was just not physically possible. So I think of sports betting as a natural extension, which is, ask 1,000 sports fans. You talk about 83% will watch more. Nobody is neutral on whether or not Tom Brady is going to play next year. So let's tie that into the conversation right now. Right? Let's create an outlet for folks to have more than an opinion. Let's tie an opportunity for them to have a stake in that. So the key to that is going to be removing friction from that process and being able to work with regulators in different jurisdictions to make sure that we have the most seamless connection between that content experience, and whether it be around a game, whether it be around a player, or whether it be around something else entirely, make sure that we are doing so in a way that makes it as easy for somebody to play as we can.
Yeah. And you use one of my favorite words, friction, right? So, so you're absolutely right. This whole conversation today really is about removing the friction with the consumer.
And I think this is really important to talk about because if you look at what we are doing right now, right, it is flat out wonky as hell. It's not a great experience. At the same time, what I would ask everybody to kind of do is put your little time travel hat on, right, and go back to the first time you ripped a song off of Napster, right? And you're sitting there saying, this is freaking amazing. In like 5 minutes, I can download a song and not have to go to a record store or something like that. And the fact of the matter is the quality of experience we accepted simply because it was different and it was novel was today something that would be just unimaginably unacceptable. So it is super wonky right now, and all of us are beholden to do the best job we can in terms of understanding the nuances of local regulation so that we can make sure that we are consistently pushing the boundaries of those experiences, because this is ultimately the success is going to ultimately come down to that removal of friction.
Scott, content creator, where does the wagering piece come into the play for Sinclair?
Well, from a pure content perspective, I know we've dabbled here and there, and obviously we have the same restrictions as everyone else when it comes to what we're allowed to do in particular states. So I know we've sold some wonderful paid programming in certain markets to folks in Pennsylvania and the like, and I know we've certainly had conversations with you guys about some of our RSN properties. But look, I'm certainly with Geoff in terms of trying to figure out what can we do that's accretive from a sports perspective. What can we do that's and Kenny talked about it too, that is integrated in the broadcast in sort of a thoughtful way, that's additive and not sort of detracts from sort of what our principal product is, which is our fans and making sure they're happy with the experience. So look, we're probably just like anyone else looking at secondary feeds and what we can do there in terms of the more data-driven feeds and things of that like. So again, we're really sort of, I feel like, early innings of trying to figure out.
Well, you have local experts, right? You're a local sports guy, for example, in Champaign, Decatur.
Well, so to me, this is one of the more fascinating things that we can probably spend a lot more time on than we won't. But our ability to customize experiences as a media partner for a particular fan group, to me, is a fascinating way to drive engagement. What we can offer people as a prize, I mean, money's great, but what if it was throwing out the first pitch at Wrigley or something like that, which again is an incredibly unique opportunity we can do in every market we operate in from a sports perspective. So, I'm intrigued by what we can sort of come up with on a RSN by RSN basis to really drive engagement around sports betting and free-to-play opportunities.
Derek, you produce 17 hours a day?
17 hours of live content a day.
Where does wagering come into it? Not, you certainly talk about wagering plenty. In all 17 hours, but where does...
17 hours of conversations and information about
where
sports
does
betting.
The actual wager,
So,
does that piece, will that enter your business model?
So that isn't in our current plans. We want to be able to work with everyone here. We want to be able to work with everyone out there. We want to work with every possible sports book. We want to, right? I think it was alluded to earlier, one of the best pieces of being here at the South Point is the fact that they're an independent operator.
Yeah.
And so that allows us, again, to remain independent and work with different books in different jurisdictions so that if it's coming to Biloxi, we can go to Biloxi. We can talk to the folks in Biloxi. If you're talking about, the Eagles game in New Jersey, the betting up there is very different on the Eagles game than it's here in Vegas. And so we can have those conversations across the country, and we can bring in experts from each region and each book to talk about how they're seeing the game and how that impacts how people are wagering without getting into the actual wagering ourselves. We also look, with our talent, we very much look at our talent as the ultimate experts, and they don't have an angle, right? They are part of the VSiN team. They're trying to give as much content and information as possible without influencing you to bet at this X and Y site or X and, so that we can provide information that you can use then to go to any other partner to place that bet.
All of you generate some type of subscription revenue to an extent. 3 of you generate advertising revenue. You don't have that.
We're working on it. Yep.
So that's coming. The advertiser, whether it's a national advertiser, a major agency on the Madison Avenue, Wacker Drive, do you feel any, Geoff, I'll start with you, do you feel any pushback from advertisers, brands, agencies on this content?
Not yet. I mean, we are super early days, and we've been in conversations with with our leading partners on this for well over, for about a year actually now. And I think, one of the keys here is going to be to demonstrate that we do a very good job of segregating. There you go. We do a very good job of basically making sure that folks who are getting the specific calls to action a wager are folks who are of age, who have opted in and live in legally addressable markets. I think that one of the things that everybody is very conscious of from a rights holder's perspective and from a media company perspective as well. This is a hyper exciting opportunity. If this is something that is not for you, it'll piss you off to get pounded over the head with these calls to action, and it's going to be one of the challenges that Scott and the linear guys have, because right now, they are kind of in a one-size-fit-all content experience where pure play digital entities have an easier time self-selecting delivery around that, and it's going to be one of the things that they're going to have to be, they'll figure it out. They're all smart guys, but it is going to be one of the things they have to navigate.
Rick, have you heard any concerns, advertiser brand-wise?
We have brand safety concerns on a programmer-by-programmer basis, but I think that for the folks that again, as it becomes more legal, more accepted, everybody's kind of excited about the opportunity there. There are some major advertisers spending a lot of money, and our ad sales folks in New York, see it as a huge opportunity to help grow the revenue, grow the business. Sling's been set up with dynamic ad insertion since 2015, 2016. One of the major focuses after launch was, we monetize it off a subscription and revenue basis, advertising basis. So I think there are programmers that are going to have concerns, but the trend has been, how do I get a piece of that pie? So
The trend is looking for engagement, right? I mean, from an advertising
users,
standpoint,
yeah. So,
where are the eyeballs? Where is the engagement? And
I think another piece of it is also frequency capping, all sorts of different things that you want to make sure in terms of the message not being, I think a very common complaint during a sporting event is, I just saw the same ad in the same break over and over again, and you almost can quote the commercial better than remember things from the game.
And I still don't want to shed it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there are a lot of improvements in terms of the user experience and finding relevant ads for the relevant users, and being more targeted and selected. In that
Scott, how about you? You play on the national, regional, and local.
Well, obviously the leagues are going to weigh in on sort of what's palatable, and we would agree. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to see a return to getting hit over the head every 2 seconds with a sports betting ad. So we're certainly cognizant of that. We don't really have a programming issue per se when you look at our regional sports networks, because in any market where the laws are moving to legalize sports betting, that the teams are doing their own deals around their venues or their arena or whatever it is they're allowed to do, and so we don't have an issue, I guess, from a whether or not it's palatable for us to be engaged in the business of advertising sports betting opportunities. So I guess that's fortunate. I guess there's folks well more engaged than I am on the sales side. But yeah, I mean, it's a balance of obviously wanting to maximize a pretty big opportunity and without angering your viewers.
Well, the other side to that argument, right, would be engagement, eyeballs, just mass audience, and unique content, right? It's fresh, it's new, it's compelling. So obviously you've got a great story to tell anybody in this industry. You hinted at it. So you are a subscription only model, direct to consumer as well as through.
We drive the majority of our revenue through subscriptions.
So how do you see your model potentially evolving? Whatever you can share with us.
Well, it goes back to the engagement and growing the audience, right? Yeah. As we look now, if you're a bettor who's spending $100, $1,000 a game or a week or whatever, spending $250 to get the most up-to-date, most informed view on things is nothing, right? That's an easy decision to make because you get insider information. Going to the average casual bettor and asking them to spend that money is probably not as appealing. So the way we're looking at it is how do we expand our reach, expand our audience to the more mass audience. And so for that, we do need to look at more of an advertising supported model. We do really well now with endemic advertisers, BetMGM, PointsBet, those folks who are in the industry who are looking to gain more customers for their service. What we really want to do is, as we expand the kind of lifestyle approach, we want to expand to the Budweisers, the Bud Lights, right? The, bookmaker blonde ales, the people who want to get eyeballs. We have a really lucrative audience, right? We have a really high income, high disposable income, right in the middle of the road that, really desirable 25 to 45-year-old folks who are watching the same sports where you see a Chevy commercial every 30 seconds. The same people are watching our content. And so that's going to be a much more attractive audience for us. And it's going to keep growing. The advertising is going to keep coming.
So consumer data is, people are trying to figure out where the eyeball is going, what's most compelling. Geoff, you probably have the greatest view into your consumers' habits of what they're consuming, how often, and what kind of scale. What kind of content is bubbling to the top from Yahoo Sports point of view? Is there something surprising among the mix beyond the majors?
I think the thing that was most surprising, I'll answer that two ways. The thing that was most surprising over the course of the last couple of years is the work that we've been doing with the National Football League on NFL Live has demonstrated that we can deliver at scale an audience that's significantly younger than the audience that's watching on linear. And what that suggests is that all the discussion about the NFL having a demo problem was actually out of place. They were having a use case problem, that folks didn't want to precondition consumption of football on either a pay TV sub or on having to sit their butt in front of a television set on a Sunday afternoon. I think that the other way I would answer that question is, and this is one of the reasons why we are so excited about the category, is that the two things that really drive the greatest consumption of Yahoo Sports is team affinity and fantasy affinity, right? So a lot of users are giving us very clear signals about a rooting interest that they have in place in sports. So with all due respect to the massive 17 hours worth of content a day, because I can't imagine, we can barely produce 20 minutes at a time, and you guys do a great job. This is, to me, about connecting somebody with that super micro slice of what's really driving them in. They're watching, that Cleveland Indians game, or they're really caring about, Pat Mahomes or whatever else. And that's where this gets really exciting, because there's an inclination in media, right, to skew towards trying to deliver these massive scale things, but increasingly the consumer is going to be driven by how well you deliver the things that are most interested in inspiring them. Does that make sense?
No, totally. Love it. Rick, again, data, what do you see trend-wise, content?
I thought the NFL is a great example of this. Recently, we just did a partnership with them where it was the last week of the season, week 16. The NFL Network had a triple header that day, and marketing. We were like, well, how many NFL fans are we really going to get in on week 16? However, NFL, great partners. We ran a test where we showed the first 15 minutes of each game, and then ran back to some of the NFL 100 content. Huge highlights until the next game started, where there was another 15-minute live look in. And what we found is that if you create that urgency, the burning platform, but give away a little piece of it, we saw our biggest, at least year over year, how many subscribers were coming in that weekend for NFL football when there's only one week left. So, I think that's an exciting example of how it's not always necessarily the content itself, it's how you're presenting it. What's the UI experience? Is there an element of free that you can use to entice people, bring them into your environment?
And what's interesting about what you're talking about too is it's so sport dominant, game dominant, right? And a lot of the things that we focus on in the content world, in our world, is talent, right? And how reliant are we on talent? The thing you're talking about is totally unreliant on talent. It's reliant on the sports. Your content is more talent driven, right? Yes. Which is interesting. Scott, with all the RSNs, with the Tennis Channel, is there a sport that you're most excited about, interested in, as it relates to betting and content around betting on that sport?
They all have their own, individual nuances that make them interesting, and certainly when you look at, what lends itself as we look further down the road in terms of microtransactions, they all have their own idiosyncrasies that are pretty interesting. But I do want to talk about tennis. So we own the Tennis Channel. Elsewhere in the world, tennis is very heavily bet on. Obviously, it lends itself to significant, point-by-point transactions, and we have a tremendous product right now in terms of not only quality but breadth. And so I think we own like 95% of the linear rights for tennis in the U.S., with the exception of the super premium matches. And when you think about down the road, what we could do with that asset from a sports betting perspective, it's pretty interesting. And so it's a pretty fascinating opportunity, certainly as we look long term. Of course, Tennis Channel is a national platform, and so you're restricted by what you can do on a national basis for now.
Someone earlier was talking about the European trends, right? Soccer and tennis, which I thought was really, really interesting. The other word that I've heard a lot today, because I don't come from the betting world, is integrity. And when I think of tennis, you think, mano a mano, one man and one against another guy, or woman against another woman, other than doubles. Do you worry about the integrity as it relates to these sports, or is that something you leave to the leagues?
I mean, you always worry about it, right? Because ultimately, if something happens, we own the Tennis Channel. But there's only so much we can control, per se. But I think you touched on something else in terms of, I do know that tennis seems to be punching above its weight in states where it's legal. And when I come into work in the morning on the East Coast, there's always tennis on. It's a beautiful thing. So if you're a sort of habitual sports bettor, well, and it's 8:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, there's probably tennis going on somewhere. And so it's a pretty fascinating sport from that regard.
Geoff, I'm always fascinated by niche sports and niche content. Are there, I think of cricket, or I think of the international type of sports that have niche ethnic kind of loyalty. Are you seeing any of that bubble up in the States, or?
In small scale, it's not something we've made a big investment in, simply because it's difficult for us to kind of meaningfully differentiate what we want to do. And I think our profile of how we imagine our hypothesis as to how we participate in this category is going to be on the daily sports that folks have that connection with, and then I think our fan is going to bet the other sports kind of during those tentpole moments. So they will become attuned to golf 4 or 5 times a year. They will become attuned to tennis 4 or 5 times a year, and that's really the profile we want to work off of, because I think it matches our audience. And I think that one of the most important things that folks are going to have to think about is really understanding, is learning to take a nuanced approach to how they kind of segment out their audience, because nobody's going to be successful at being all things to all corners of audience. So you're going to have to figure out over the course of the next couple of years in terms of how you kind of align against your audience characteristics and how you kind of match up against that best you can.
Do you see demand for this content higher in areas where betting is legal than not, or?
Intuitively, that makes sense. I've not seen, we are still too early days in terms of the amount of content that we are creating to definitively say that, but it would make sense.
Have you seen, how long has VSiN been?
This will be our 3rd Super Bowl.
Okay, so 3 years, early days. How has consumer reaction to your content changed? Obviously more, right? They're watching more. But any other?
It's interesting. I keep coming back to lifestyle. We see people who, there's hardcore heavy sports bettors. Yeah. But we're engaging more and more people who are, part-time, dabble here, a little there, and they really want to be part of it. They want to hear what's going on in Las Vegas. They want to hear stories from our morning team. They really, and when you talked about content earlier, our morning show is our highest performing show, and they talk more lifestyle and the Vegas lifestyle sometimes than they do actual X's and O's, numbers, lines and odds. And so that's been a really big change. And we get people coming to the South Point. We had someone come in this morning looking to just meet some of the folks on air that they hear every day, and either in their car on Sirius, or they're watching on their computer or our app. And so what we're seeing is a lot more lifestyle just general enthusiast folks coming in the door, and that's increasing our audience. And so we're growing the audience. We also see a lot of people who are watching for shoulder content. So before the game, after the game, between games. So you talked about having a game on, and that's what's driving people. We're seeing it, so if you look at our viewing and our consumption, peaks, hits the game time, and then kind of levels out. Right? But leading up to the game, that hour before the game, when people are really wanting to get their bets in, they want to know, are they making the best decision? And that's where we're seeing a lot of growth from our audience, both in the lifestyle segment, as well as in that time, the pre-game and then post-game analysis.
At Sling, you've got a lot of people knocking on your door saying, oh, yeah, you should carry my channel, right? The horse channel, the whatever it may be, right? It's compelling content for a niche audience, and it'll be great. You're carrying VSiN. We're their guests, so I don't expect you to say anything harsh, but to carry a network like that brings what to the Sling platform?
I mean, I think it's all about it's another thing for people to watch before the game, and at Sling, it's all about choice and flexibility. We have 2 different base packages, different extras you can add on, 40 to 50 standalone options, as well as free-to-user options, or one-time rentals with movies and pay-per-views, and we're looking at micro transactions as well. So for VSiN to come out with a subscription product that is for a dedicated audience, like the advanced gambler, that they find their audience, it helps complement the overall library, so that when you come to Sling, there's something for everybody, and they can cater it to exactly what they want.
Good. Well, we just have like 5 minutes left, and I do want to make sure we get some questions in, and I don't know if I have the only microphone now, since my microphone. Does anybody have any questions? Raise your hand. I'll come get you for these fine gentlemen. No, we're good? Oh, okay. Here, I'll run to you.
It's true interactivity.
That's a table, not stairs.
Just given the fact that we know people will watch whatever they can bet on, like most people in this room, I'm shocked people bet on esports, but they do. And you guys kind of all have bandwidth in your own ways where you could show those matches. It's something you guys are looking at in terms of the fact if the gambling's coming, the viewers will come with it.
We would love to broadcast games and we're actually working, and we talked about complementary content. One of the things that we really are actively working on, internally we call it the Betcast, where you have basically an alternate feed, right? And you can be watching the game, but hearing only about what's going on from a gambling perspective, right? Do you, hey, this goalie's hot right now, you should bet the under. This guy's, got 2 goals. You got a plus 180 to get a hat trick, so you should, take that action. Those kind of things that complement the live broadcast. Those are the activities that we're really looking at when you're talking about what content's available and how do we complement it. We're likely not going to be the place you come to watch the game, but if you're an active gambler, we're the type of place that you want to come when the game's on, because you want to be in-game. We heard a lot about in-game wagering earlier. It keeps growing and growing and growing. It's just going to keep bigger and bigger and bigger. And as we have the opportunities to introduce people to that, this is a great way to complement the live broadcast that all of you have, so that we can layer on top of that another element. You talk about alternate camera angles, talk about alternate broadcast teams. This is a perfect example of a way to have an alternate feed that satisfies a very big audience of people that goes along with the broadcast.
Yeah, from our perspective at Sling, we want to support our programming partner strategy around esports. ESPN's been big into Overwatch. Turner was with League of Legends. The thing I find fascinating about it is how quickly it changes. Fortnite had its moment and it was crazy, and then you have another popular. So how do you build a network? If you're going to be a network that's solely focused on esports, how are you able to pivot and change with something that's so growing so quickly and changing so often? There are a number of different partners in the space that are doing interesting stuff, and what I'm seeing is there are a lot of upstarts that are looking at 24/7 esports channels. So we're having those conversations and trying to learn more about, how can you build a network around a sport that's just changing and behaviors are changing so quickly.
So anybody else?
Hi guys, my name's Carter from Champions Round. You guys mentioned briefly about the challenges of making sure that you have segmented, targeted advertisements on your networks. I mean, obviously you guys can split things up regionally and depending on which advertisers buy where, but that's a very unique challenge because I'd imagine that as an advertiser, it would be great if you could say, hey, you can target my specific users at a more bifurcated level. Obviously online it's pretty easy to take someone's data and figure out what targeted ads go to them, but as networks, how are you guys approaching that challenge beyond just, regional targeting?
Feels like
probably-
it's aimed more
that's you,
towards
that's
that.
right, you.
I mean, look, we're still so early that we haven't, right, there's only a handful of states where we have sports properties where this has come up. And I think, when you look at, I think we've always been sort of the shotgun, right? The broad in terms of just a pure linear exposure. And so when we look at what we're trying to accomplish and what advertiser might be interested in us, I mean, you're not just targeting the hardcore person who is going to be, somebody that's a heavy sports bettor. We might be an ideal party for somebody who's looking to sort of have a much broader reach, looking from maybe a casual user in addition to much more frequent users. So I do think there's a whole host of addressable linear solutions that have been talked about over the years and certainly seem to be coming more to fruition that will greatly go towards solving that particular question as it pertains to our networks, some of which might be over on the floor right now. So we're looking forward to being able to deploy things that our friends in the digital world and cable world have been able to do for years on a linear basis in the not too distant future.
We've actually had a little interesting, right? We can't split by region, right? So our advertising, we're advertising to people in BetMGM, right? You can only sign up for BetMGM in New Jersey. And we're very clear about that when we mention that. However, what we've seen is they're actually hearing from people across the country who want to sign up. They can't place a bet, but they're actually getting leads in other, right? So they kind of know where the demand is coming from across the country from those, our lack of ability to target that specifically has actually ended up giving them some new leads across the country that they didn't realize were out there.
Got a couple minutes. Anybody else out there? Feel like the old Phil Donahue used to run.
Chicago, hello.
I just want to, and this is obviously something that Derek and everybody at VSiN is already doing. In fact, I've been on a couple of the betcasts, which have been, they're entertaining as heck for sure, in a very different way. But this might be more for Scott, but maybe all three of the other panelists here is, and a lot of people express concern about this. You don't want to hit the vast audience over the head with the whole sports betting element. But as this expands, I think neither do you want to, completely ignore it, or have it be so subtle that most of you won't get it. I mean, in a blowout Monday Night Football game, the only reason people are hanging around late in the fourth quarter is the total or the side is still in play. Are those considerations that Scott and perhaps Rick and that you're all kind of haggling with right now, I guess, for lack of a better term?
I mean, we've learned. I mean, we got heavily involved in DFS a few years ago and marketed pretty hardcore to our existing fantasy game base, and found very quickly on that folks who didn't want to take to that product really got alienated and ticked off if we pushed it too hard. So, I think this isn't unique to sports betting. This is around the way that the consumption of media is going to evolve across the board, which is consumers are going to have increasingly heightened expectations that the experiences that they get delivered reflect their own particular appetites and tastes. So anything that somebody gets served up that is opposite what their expectations are going to alienate them. I think it's going to be especially sensitive here, and we're going to have to be careful.
Yeah, I'd say it's an incumbent on us to figure out if there is an alternative experience, whether it's a secondary feed or whether it's purely done through a reimagined regional sports network digital ecosystem that, for the folks that might want a different experience, maybe much more sports betting centric, that we're able to sort of point them that way rather than inundate sort of the primary feed, which really, we sort of look at it. You're always going to have a viewing first feed, and that's really has to stay true to your primary event, whether it's a major league game or an NHL game. And so we've thought a lot about that primary feed, and we've thought a lot about what a secondary feed might look like that caters to, an audience that might want to see a different kind of content along with the live events. So, obviously we're subject to league restrictions and all those things that go into that. But as we sort of move into the future, we've definitely put a lot of thought towards what our viewing and what our sports gaming experiences look like.
And as a distributor, most of those programming decisions lie with the programmer. But we think about it as how can we make the decision for folks that want to seek out that content between a primary and secondary feed as frictionless as possible. Making sure that it's available to them if they want it, or maybe it's something within the UI that we're building in ourselves so that they have that optionality.
Awesome. Well, we're out of time. Geoff, Rick, Scott, Derek, thank you all very much. Great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.